Sharon, should we kick this off?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Okay, so thank you to everybody who's joining us this evening. I'll start things off. My name is Jonathan Cohn. I'm the chair of the Boston Ward 4 Democratic Committee. We are delighted to be hosting this forum with our partners at the Boston Ward 5 Democratic Committee. For your reference, you may already know, Ward 4 covers territory in the Back Bay, Fenway in the South End, and our friends in Ward 5 cover Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Fenway, and then little pieces of downtown Chinatown in the South End. Many of you joined us a couple months ago for our mayoral forum, and that's definitely an important hot button race. But we also have an important city council elections this year as well. And with 2 city councilors at large running for mayor, there will be at least 2 new city councilors at large elected this fall. And all of you here, presuming that you are registered voters in Boston, will have the opportunity to vote for up to 4 of them in the election, both for the preliminary in September and the general in November. We have 14 of those candidates running. Joining us this evening, we will have them in two sets of 7 so that you can have more time with them on each occasion. This event will be recorded so that you can watch after if you want to look back or share it. Be recorded and posted to YouTube as well as live streamed to Facebook during the event itself. We also have closed captioning going, which you should be able to see at the bottom. And because of that, candidates try to talk somewhat slowly, unlike me, so that our closed captioner can do her job well. We are especially delighted to have with us moderator Meghan Irons. Meghan Irons is a journalist at the Boston Globe, covering a range of topics that touch on how culture, politics, and social issues intersect with everyday life. She was a member of the award-winning Project 68 Blocks, has explored the diverse communities in Boston, and currently serves as the City Hall Bureau Chief. Meghan, take it away.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that, and good evening, everyone. I'm Meghan Irons, and I cover politics now. I'm delighted to be here this evening to moderate a large slate of candidates seeking one of 4 slots for Boston City Councilor at Large. 8 of the candidates tonight will emerge from the September 14 preliminary election and go on to compete for 4 at-large seats in the general election on November 2nd. I want to thank our hosts, Boston Ward 4 Democrats and Boston Ward 5 Democrats. It is a true testament to our democracy that we're seeing so many people and such a diverse group run for office. And as John said, we've broken up the group into 2, so you'll have an opportunity tonight to easily meet them and hear their vision for the city. Welcome, everybody. Well, let's meet the first group now. Kelly Bates of Hyde Park. Michael Flaherty, who's the current at-large city councilor from South Boston. Hi, Mike. Alex Gray of Jamaica Plain. Ruthie Louis-Jean of Hyde Park. Caller Montero of Dorchester. Bridget Nee Nash of South Boston. And Nick Vance of Hyde Park. Welcome, everybody. Before we get started, I just want to go over the rules a little bit. I'll ask you a question, and then each of you will have 60 seconds to respond. We have a timer, and we'll be checking your response, and you'll be muted if you go past the 60 seconds. So let's start with some getting to know you questions. With Kelly Bates, let's start with you. Why are you running for City Councilor at Large, and why do you think you should be elected?
Thanks, Megan. Thank you all for having me come here tonight. You know, I'm running to be Boston City Councilor at Large because I really believe that it's critical to have someone with experience, someone who has worked for 20 years in the city, fighting for low income and working families, fighting for racial justice, fighting for women and girls, to help us repair from this economy, which is not working for everyone, to really recover from the COVID crisis. And because I really believe that we can reimagine a better and more equitable future for our city. We have to work towards affordable housing, equity in our public schools, and I believe racial justice. And as a bridge builder, as a Black woman, as an Irish woman in this city, I know that we can do that, and we can come together at a critical time to really help people who have been on the margin, off the margins, on the margins. Thank you.
Michael Flaherty, why are you seeking another term, and why do you think you should be reelected?
Thank you, Megan, for hosting or sponsoring along with the ward committee sponsors. It's an honor and privilege to serve as your at-large city councilor. I'm excited about the future of our city. I love helping people, and I know that as a city council, I've been able to do that. So we're actually looking at a minimum of 5 new members to join the council, to join 4 members who are in their first term. So 9 out of our 13 city councils will have served 1 term or less. If there's ever a year for experience and institutional knowledge and helping sort of introduce colleagues to how to get things done, to the building itself, but also as a citywide city council to the neighborhoods, and also mentor and introduce them to to what makes, I think, our city great, and which makes our city council great as the legislative branch of city government. So I'm a problem solver, I'm a bridge builder, I'm a consensus builder, and I've served on a number of committees, most notably the new committee on COVID relief funds, which I hope to work with all of the councilors moving forward.
Alex Gray, why are you running? Alex, you're mute. Okay, there you go.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you to everybody organizing this event tonight. Look, I wasn't born a good listener, but I had to become one when I went blind. It was the only way I could succeed at the things I wanted to do in life, whether that was to be a student, to be an employee, or to be a family or friend. And so I believe so strongly, after 4 years where the loudest voice on cable television and the most divisive words on social media somehow ruled the day each day, that we need listeners in positions of power now more than ever. And I have made my entire career, which has been in public service, taking the time to listen to people and putting their thoughts and concerns to action. And I did that under Mayor Walsh, under Governor Patrick, and starting working on housing and homelessness. And I want to be a voice for people with disabilities on the council. Thank you so much for having me.
Ruthie Louijan, why are you running?
Hi, Megan. Thank you, Ward 4 and Ward 5, for hosting this. My name is Ruth C., and I'm running for Boston City Council at Large because there is an urgency to the issues that we face as a city. When it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to equity and excellence in all of our schools, and when it comes to supporting our small businesses that have had such a hard time during this pandemic, we need someone who is a leader, but who believes in leadership from the ground up. Right? A lot of the great things that are happening are in our community organizations. I am a daughter of this city. I am the daughter of working class Haitian immigrants who came here with nothing. I have gone through the Boston public school systems. I have seen the good and the bad of this city, and I love this city. And I know that working together, we can build a better city for all that is equitable, that is inclusive, and that calls everyone in. I call everyone in. I leave with a smile, but I come with teeth so I can work on behalf of our residents. I believe in meeting people where they are, constituent services, and pushing for a better Boston for all of us, where we all share in the prosperity.
Carla Montero, why are you running?
Hi, thank you all for hosting tonight, and thank you for having me. Again, my name is Carla Montero. I'm the daughter of Cape Verdean immigrants. I use she, her pronouns. I have lived experience living in the city of Boston and having a child at the age of 19 and having to navigate the welfare system and being on the brink of homelessness and experiencing housing insecurities and also food insecurities. And as a social worker, seeing a lot of those same gaps in services. And I have spent a lot of time devoting my life to the community, delivering food, delivering PPE. I have stepped in every single time this city was in crisis and have aided the community and have delivered food and PPE to the most vulnerable members of our community. And so I'm running because we need to fill a lot of these gaps that we're seeing in services in the city of Boston and connecting people to resources. If everyone in Boston is able to be connected to basic needs, everyone can thrive. And so that's why I'm running for city council, to bridge those gaps and to ensure that people are thriving in Boston.
Thank you. Bridget Nee Walsh, why are you running?
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. I'm Bridget Nee Walsh. Boston born and raised. I grew up working the push carts in Faneuil Hall. So I grew up, I don't think I've ever had one job in my life. I think I'm a different candidate from everyone here. because I put myself through high school. Public school wasn't even an option when I was in high school. It was you're going to Catholic school and you're going to figure out how to get your way through it. I'm a single mom. I'm a 15-year union iron worker, so I represent trades. In that 15 years, I've worked tirelessly to recruit more females. 15 years ago, there were 30 female iron workers in Local 7, and today there's 150. I've also become first. What else? I have senior parents that I care about, two small businesses, and I'm every average person.
Thank you. Nick Vance, you close out this question. Why do you think you should be elected?
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Ward 4 and 5, for hosting this. And thank you, everybody, for jumping on to hear this lovely discussion. I'm born and raised from the city of Boston, and I have grown up around service. My family and I believe in service, are dedicated to helping our communities any way possible. My background is working with youth and workforce development, and I see that our city is at a crossroads. The city that I love in many regards has become the haves and the have-nots. And we really need to make sure that moving forward, our city is more equitable and accountable for all residents in the city of Boston. I also want to say that this is one of those times in our history where we need to be paying attention to the people, and we need to be mindful of how people feel and where they're going, especially dealing with mental health. And I'm here and I'm focused on helping our city move forward.
Thank you. As you've noticed, at the 10-second mark, you'll hear that bong sound. So just wrap up right after that. But thank you all for those answers. The next series of questions, next couple of questions are what I call getting to know you questions. They don't require an entire minute, but just some quick, easy thinking from all of you. And I'm going to start with you, Councilor Flaherty. Name a book that you read recently that you would recommend to people who are watching tonight?
I would say 1776 talked a lot about the role that Henry Knox played in sort of the birth of our country, which happened close to my neighborhood up at Dorchester Heights. And so there was a very tense situation where the British had city of Boston surrounded, and Henry Knox made the decision to bluff and put the cannons up in place without the munitions. The munitions were several days behind, and when the fog lifted and the ship started to talk about bum rushing the shores, they hesitated because they saw all the cannons. And when they sent word back to England as to what to do, the munitions arrived, and that arguably led to the birth of our country. So it's a great book, and Henry Knox played a huge role as the unsung hero.
Okay, Alex Gray.
Yeah, I think the book that I most recently remember reading was Born to Run, the Bruce Springsteen autobiography, and certainly he is one of the great 20th, 21st century philosophers, in my opinion. And I learned so much about him, his storytelling, how he sort of came of age, struggling to find a place in this world in his adolescence, through his time as a father and a parent, the relationships he had, his struggles with mental illness. So I found it to be a very interesting, holistic story about somebody sort of becoming the person that they are and accepting the changes that come throughout their lives.
Ruthie Louisan.
I'm going to say two, one fiction, one nonfiction. So
one. How about one?
Okay. One. One would be there's a really good nonfiction book that talks about the history of Boston, but also talks about particularly the history of neighborhoods like Mattapan, Dorchester, and Roxbury. It's called The Tragedy of Good Intentions, the death of a Jewish American community. And it talks about how our neighborhoods came to be how they are through patterns of blockbusting and redlining, and the role of the city and in the private market really in preventing integration, which was happening, but because of private market lending practices and fear tactics, our neighborhoods look the way they are, and we have a pretty segregated city because of intentional practices, which is why we need to be as intentional about the practices to get us out. And then Everything Inside is a great nonfiction book by Edward Gunn.
Let's just sneak that in. Carla Montero.
So I would have to recommend The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, who is also a social worker and a researcher, which is a book that talks about letting go of who you think you're supposed to be and just be who you are. And I think it's a great way for people to embrace who they are and to learn more about yourself, and just learning how to let go and let loose, and just dance when people are watching, and just enjoying your life and just being happy and just learning a lot about who you are.
Brittany Walsh, what's a good book you'd recommend?
I always tend to go back to To Kill a Mockingbird. That's a book I leave next to my bed. I've been reading it over and over since high school. It's always just affected me in on so many levels, and every time you read it, you kind of feel differently about the way the story goes. But I haven't honestly read it in probably 9 months to a year, because reading is like such a luxury to me. Like, I have a single mother. I have a mother with dementia, so I technically have 2 kids, and I have 2 small businesses and ironwork, and like, I wish I could read more. It's like books on tape or on the car audio now.
Okay.
If the kids allow it.
Nick Vance.
Many people here are already aware of, I will be having a child in about 40 days. My first born, a girl. So I'm reading a book right now called Daddy's on Deck, which talks about fathers being engaged and involved in their child's life from day one, and how to break down stigmas of fathers not being in the picture. It's very interesting and intriguing to me. Especially with everything else in the world, it's interesting to kind of hone in on the fact that I will soon have a little one around here. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
In advance. Kelly Bates, you have a good book?
Yes, and congratulations, Nick. One of my favorite authors is Adrienne Marie Brown. She's an artist, and she wrote a book called Emergent Strategy, and how not all change is linear, but it can surprise us, and how we seize those moments to be creative and innovative in that moment can create great change, and how love is still the greatest force of social transformation that exists. And I believe that. And it's an easy book to read because there's poetry and other kinds of ways of learning, which I prefer. So I'm with Bridget. Sometimes I need other kinds of modalities as a mom, and but she's very accessible.
A lot of heavy reading, you guys. A lot of heavy reading. This next question, I'm hoping I can get 1-word answers from all of you. What would be the first place you would take a friend visiting Boston for the first time? Alex, 1 word.
Can I get 2 words? Fenway Park.
Okay, good. Carla.
Franklin Park.
Bridget.
The observation deck at the Custom House.
Nick.
Mine was stolen. I was gonna say Franklin Park. It's
All
my
right.
favorite place on the planet.
You can go to Castle Island.
Yes.
Kelly.
Freedom Trail.
Mike. Cole.
Reno's for Italian food in East Boston.
Okay. I'm gonna take all those notes and write it down because those are good ideas. Let's get into the issues now. First, we're going to start with housing. I'm hearing an echo there. Okay, great, thanks. What is one housing initiative that the city is currently implementing that you think is working to reduce housing costs? And what is the one thing that is not working? And how would you work to change a thing that is not working? Alex Gray, you want to take that?
Yeah, so I think that the first generation homebuyer program that Mayor Walsh started, and I think Mayor Janey is continuing to work on, is really important. It's the best way to build generational wealth. We all know that the average white family has over $250,000, and the average Black family in our city has less than $10 on average. So I think that's a really important thing to continue the work on. And I know there's been some work recently around within the affirmatively fair housing work to talk about boosting accessible housing. And so I think that's an area of growth for the city. I know not just for seniors, but for people with disabilities, it can often be a double burden to find a place that you can both afford and that's physically accessible. Something about 1% of housing nationally is wheelchair accessible, about 5% is for mobility impairment. So I'd love, the city's working on this, but I'd love to be an ally for them to boost accessible housing.
Ruthie, I did forget you, and I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't take it personally. I got my answer in.
What's your favorite place in the city? Go ahead.
Oh, that's different. But where I would take a friend is Southwest Corridor Park, and I explain why in the chat. Fun for everyone, rich history, Southwest Corridor Park.
Okay.
Franklin Park is a close second.
Okay. Now that I have you, you can answer this question about housing.
Okay.
What's the one initiative that you think is currently working to reduce housing costs, and what's the one thing that's not working, and how would you change the thing that is not working?
One of the things that is not working, or that is working, for example, is in Mattapan over on Morin Street, there was a large building that was sold to a private developer, and the city stepped in to work with the new developer, to the new owner, to maintain rents at their current rate, and to find the funding to support the new buyer, so that we can make sure that our residents are staying in buildings that they've lived for a very, very long time. And so having the city and Sheila Dillon intervene in those ways to make sure that our residents are able to stay in their homes is great. Now, where that's not great is where you have new buyers coming in who don't want to work with the city. It's happening also in Mattapan. So in one neighborhood, you can see the power of tenants. And, at the same time, those tenants who want to stay there, their rents are being doubled. So we need to support tenant coalitions so that we can get residents to stay in their homes, and the city can do that.
Thank you. It's Carla. How would you answer that question?
Hi, so as a recipient of resources from the Home Buyers Program and a former MAHA alumni, I think that the affordable programs are really great and really helpful. I was able to purchase a house at the age of 27 and move my whole family in and preventing us all from housing insecurity. What is not working, there's a couple things that are not working, but I'll start with the way that the area median income is calculated. But it includes the area of Wellesley, and so it definitely has a negative impact on Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury, East Boston. And so that's something that we need to change so that it reflects the areas where people live, so that the housing is more affordable. I think we also need to increase the inclusionary development program and increasing that the affordable units from 13% to at least 50%, so that we are meeting the demands of housing, of the lack of housing in the city of Boston.
Thank you. Bridget, how would you answer that question?
The first-time home buyer has definitely aided a lot of people in staying in the city of Boston. As far as I think a lot of these units that are being built are still aimed towards like 1 bedroom and sometimes 2 bedroom. I think if we want children and family in the city of Boston, we have to start building more 2 and 3 bedroom. Like people keep saying, well, there isn't a demand for it. There is a demand for it. People want to raise their children in Boston. They're just getting pushed out more and more. But if we could stop building more 2 and 3 bedrooms, we could start, maybe the schools wouldn't turn into condos. Maybe, the churches wouldn't be turned into condos, and we could have more kids at the parks as opposed to dogs. That's all.
Thank you. Advance.
Yes. So one of the things I definitely think that is working.
Nick?
Well,
Nick, you've frozen a little bit.
oh, me?
No, go ahead now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I said Tent City is definitely a program that has worked. I've had the opportunity to sit down and talk with occasions on to fruition, and
in fairness to you, why don't we just wait a little bit because you're having a little technical difficulty. Kelly, why don't you answer that question? We'll come back to Nick.
Megan, I think the inclusionary development policy is a good one, so that residential developments have to put at least 13% toward affordable housing units. The problem is that's not enough. It doesn't go far enough. It should be closer to at least a third. If we think about the families and the need that we know exists in Boston. I also think we are leaving the housing market unregulated. And I don't think we've gone far enough. And I think we need to bring back rent control and rental stabilization so that housing costs and rental costs are not squeezing our families and that they now feel they have to leave the city. We have to do more in this area. It is the #1 issue of voters in Boston. We have not gone far enough. And so I think working together with the city council, with our mayor, with all of you and the ward committees, we can make a difference in this area.
Michael Flaherty.
Hey, Megan, how AMI is calculated is a huge disservice to the city. HUD does not publish a local Boston or a Boston neighborhood specific AMI. They lump us in with Quincy, suburban communities. They call it the metro formula. So that pushes the number up high for the median income, which does not serve Boston residents well. That's what's not working. What is working is the public-private partnerships that help refurbish and increase the number of our public housing units through the BHA. As someone who was born in public housing, was born in the Old Harbor projects, that's very near and dear to me, and I've led efforts on the Boston City Council to make sure we're putting our best foot forward. As the federal government has turned their back on public housing, these public-private partnerships that we have in the city of Boston create tremendous opportunity for some of our most vulnerable and our poorest residents in the dire economic need to be able to stay in their homes.
Nick Vance.
All right, can you all hear and see now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So what I was alluding to was Tent City is something that is working extremely well, has been around for quite a while now, and it's a great model for us as a city to really replicate. And it is time that we need to replicate something like Tent City, where you can have more affordable units that are multi-tiered, so that way, right now the supply doesn't meet the demand. So right now the city of Boston has a huge demand, or else we're going to lose especially that millennial gap out of the city. And I'm also a strong proponent that we need to look at rental programs and figure out how we can work on more ownership. Right now, everything's about affordable rental. We need to start talking about affordable buying because that's how we can really keep our communities whole.
Thank you. Michael Flaherty, why don't you start the next question on education?
Again.
Do you support eliminating the entrance test for the city's 3 exam schools? What would be your solution?
Sure, I believe we should have an exam for the exam schools, and someone that was not a very great test taker. We should combine the exam with the students' grades, because not everyone performs at their best at a particular day or on a particular exam, as well as maybe recommendations from their teachers. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we maintain the academic standards and the academic rigors of the pride of our fleet. They're 3 of our best schools, particularly the Boston Latin School. So we want to make sure that that's accessible and available for everyone. We need to make sure that we're providing the test probably during the school day so more kids can compete, but also provide test taking skills and preparation for all of our students. And so I do want the exam to remain, but I also want to put it in perspective that should not be the be all end all. It's also the reason why I don't support the MCAS as the be all end all to moving on to the next grade. It should be used as a barometer, but not the entire be all end all.
Alex?
Thank you for the question. I don't support eliminating the exam. I think that, as Councilor Flaherty said, I don't think it should be the be-all, end-all, as he so eloquently put it. But I think that it should be a factor, and I think that we can talk about using grades. We can talk about other, ways to recommendations, or look at oral presentations. Think about folks particularly around maybe their artistic abilities. I also want to say in this conversation, 21% of our students in the Boston Public Schools have an individualized education plan, meaning that They are special education students. I'm the product of a special education system myself, so this issue is near and dear to me. And so, I will certainly work to improve and maintain our exam schools where they're at, but I'm always going to advocate for special education students. That's why I advocate for a dedicated school committee seat representing special education students in Boston.
Ruthie.
Megan, hi Megan. I am a graduate of Boston Latin School. That school opened doors for me. Prior to that, I had been attended schools that some would consider underperforming. From there, I went to Columbia and to Harvard Law School, and am now an attorney. I think that we need to make all of our schools better. Boston Latin School and our exam schools are definitely part of the equity discussion, but the equity discussion begins in K0. It begins in the first grade. It does not start with the exam schools in the 7th grade. So we need to have some sort of assessment for BLS. The exam schools already look at your grades. So right now it's half exam, half grades, except for this year during the pandemic. And I agreed with the temporary plan. Going forward, to really solve the equity issues, the declining numbers of Black and Latinx students that actually have been increasing under Headmaster Scarrett, we need to think about grades, assessment, and let's look at low-income census tract. And let's make sure we are giving priority also to students who come from low-income census tract. Holistic review of our students. That's what we need to open the door so that they can have that potential.
Thank you. Carla.
I'm opposed the standardized testing. We already know that a lot of these tests are they're skewed, and they don't. A lot of people in the Black communities don't even know when the tests are going to happen. And so when I was growing up, a lot of people didn't even know what the exam schools were. When we had to apply, when we weren't even prepared for the exam. So I think that we need to do a better job at letting the community know when the exams are happening if we are going to keep the standardized testing to get into these schools. And so, I think that a lot of students struggle to take exams, and we do need to do a better job at just educating families about the exam. And if we are going to keep it and people decide that they're going to take it, we need to have some forms so that people are opting in, opting out, or saying that they have received the information for the testing for the exam schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Bridget.
I do not support doing away with the exam. I do think that we have to reevaluate the Boston Public Schools and bring them all up so that they're all at exam level. I mean, we have to figure out why there isn't equity across the city. Why aren't all the kids getting the same education? And why aren't they at exam school level? But I think Carla was right. I remember even 20 years ago, 40 years ago, how old I am. But they didn't publicize that test. It was very exclusive on who even knew that the test was coming out and who was going for it and who was prepared for it. I think it should be publicized a lot more than it is. But again, I think we need to reevaluate the Boston public school system and find out why aren't all these kids on that level.
Thank you, Bridget. You're also having a little technical difficulty as well. I'm not sure how you can fix that, but your next question, Nick Van.
Yes, thank you. I think, first of all, on June 11th, there was actually an article written already in Boston Globe discussing some of these issues. And number one we need to look at, though, is who exactly is proctoring this exam, because they're the same company that created the ACT. And we already know that there has been countless studies done that have shown that there is bias in their exam. So I think number one is we need to look at, should that be the company that we use moving forward to give the exam? But two, I also think that I do think it should be a mixture. I was an IEP student myself, so I know full well about growing up in an education system where you may need added supports, and I was not a great test taker. But so we need to make sure that there is a mixture of looking at someone holistically and not just based on an exam. But first, we need to look at who's proctoring the exam and making sure it's right.
Thank you very much, Nick. Kelly.
I do not support admissions based on an exam. We know the data shows that it biases those who have more income It hurts those with disabilities who are trying to gain access. It hurts Black and Brown students. And I know as a city, anything that would create a disparity like that, we would say, and we would question whether that is the best way to have entrance to schools that can mean a quality education and advancement or not. That's a very serious proposition. And I have a specific proposal. I think we should reserve seats for the highest ranked students in each public middle school and zip code. And we should have a holistic admission model that looks at GPA, proven performance, and potential so that every kid has a fair chance at the best path for education in the city.
I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple of lightning round questions here. One, should the city eliminate the Boston Planning and Development Agency and create a new planning office? Bridget, yes or no?
No.
Kelly, yes or no?
It's time to eliminate it and replace it with a model that focuses on community and other representative.
No,
Yeah,
or yes? Yes or no?
No, I mean, yes, we should get rid of it,
Okay,
but
yes.
replace it with something different and more community oriented.
So it's just yes or no, folks. Michael,
No, Megan.
Alex,
No.
Ruthie,
Yes.
Carla,
Yes.
Nick.
No.
Okay. One more question, lightning round, yes or no? Do you support removing police from Boston Public Schools? Kelly.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Michael.
No, Megan.
Alex.
Yes.
Ruthie.
Yes.
Carla.
Yes.
Bridget.
No.
Nick.
Yes.
Okay. Ruthie, why don't you start with the next question on police reform? And you take the lead, but I'll start with you and then I'll make the rounds around Zoom. Given the recent scandals in the Boston Police Department, do you believe there is a systemic problem, and how would you address it as Councilor at Large?
Thanks, Megan. There is absolutely a systemic problem within the Boston Police Department. There needs to be a cultural change and a cultural shift around accountability and transparency. We also need to make sure that we are that we are empowering the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency to really play the role of uplifting what the residents are asking for. They're asking for more transparency. They're asking for when you attend I attended the the Boston City Council hearing on the BPD budget. Right, there's no accountability when it comes to the use of overtime and the abuse of overtime. You have community groups presenting data on what happens when all you do is hire more officers or increase overtime. It doesn't really reflect on improvement in the community. We know that what works is strengthening. There's a correlation between strengthening our nonprofits and a decrease in crime. Let's invest in community stabilization in our nonprofits. Let's see how much of the police force we can civilianize.
Carla.
There is a system issue, and transparency and accountability is the key things here. There have been so many things that have been hidden because of the culture of the Boston Police Department, and so I also think that we need to reallocate some of the funds from the BPD overtime and using it and creating a crisis center for the city of Boston so that we can provide more services for mental health, substance use, and people who are experiencing homelessness, and also reallocating some of those responsibilities from BPD to those crisis centers. I also believe in a collaborative approach with BPD in terms of providing services to members of the community. And also, I live in a community that was plagued with gun violence. And so every community wants to see something different. And so when we're talking about overtime and having officers patrol the areas, it's going to look different in Jamaica Plain than it's going to look in Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan.
Thank you, Carla. Bridget.
I think funds definitely have to be reallocated with the Boston Police, but I also think that we need more police. We need, police give protection. Just in South Boston alone, the uptick of crime since Mayor Walsh left is insane. We never had shootings in this town. We never had stabbings in this town. We have things like that now. Do I think you need to send, 2 cops to a domestic violence home? No, I think you need to reallocate some of those funds to social worker. I think, cops they're not trained to deal with mental health issues. They're not trained to deal with schizophrenic fits. They're not trained to deal with drug addicts. I think in that case, you need a social worker. But am I going to send a social worker to a gang fight? No, we need more cops, and the cops need the support of the city.
Thanks, Bridget. Nick, Vance.
Thank you. I definitely think there is a systemic issue within BPD. We've seen it time and time again of certain individuals being able to rise through the ranks, even though having countless reports against them for abuse of power, for disorderly conduct. So we need to really ensure that there is some level of transparency and guidance and community input. I do also believe that we need to get back to real community policing. You could drive anywhere throughout the city of Boston and you see a cop sitting in a cruiser. That's not community policing. Community policing is walking around, engaging, getting to know local people. So when things do happen, they have relationships in those communities, and especially our young people can trust them. And we for some reason have moved away from that as a city. And that's something I would advocate and push for as a councilor.
Kelly Bates.
I do think there is a systemic issue and problems. I've talked to police officers and they will tell you off the record that they agree. First of all, we know there is a prevalence of overtime being used. We need to be bargaining and in the contract process to make sure that that is where we address that issue. That is how we're going to actually effectuate change. And also, unfortunately, as in other police departments, we are still dealing with racial profiling, even in our city of Boston. I'm the only one who has actually run a racial justice organization and have worked around racial equity. And what I know and understand is that we need to have a better internal affairs and civilian review board. And we also need to think about training every 1 to 3 years around racism in this city.
Thank you, Kelly. Michael Flaherty.
Thank you, Megan. I'm on record of supporting the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency, and we'll continue to work with communities to make sure that we're lifting up the best parts of that. Also on record of supporting the BEST program and allocating funds to make sure that we're dealing with treatment and recovery issues and mental health issues differently as we move forward as a city. I'm also on record of supporting our police department. We have arguably one of the best police departments and best community policing efforts in the country. We're a model. Are we perfect? No, we're not. But looking forward to working with the leadership in the new administration to make sure that we can be the best and put forward the best offices as we move forward. And also, in addition, thinking about when I go across the city, there are people that are constantly asking for more police presence. They do enjoy their community service offices, and they do want to see more walking beats and more of the pedaling offices that are out there on the bikes. And so I get both sides of that issue, and I think that we need to continue to support our offices and give them tools because we are a relatively safe city compared to other cities our size and bigger.
Thank you, Michael. Alex.
Thank you for the question, Megan. So, I've been in this race since September. So, my thoughts around policing have always been informed by the conversations that I've had with residents of Boston. And, a couple concerns tend to come up over and over again. And the first is around accountability. I think people are afraid of what happened to George Floyd and so many others might happen to somebody they know or happen in their neighborhood. They have concerns that police officers are held accountable for what they do on the job and off the job. I think, Ruth Z and Councilor Flaherty have mentioned the Office of Police Accountability, and that came about, through the Mayor Walsh Task Force in cooperation with the NAACP and the police. I think that's important. The subpoena power, the oversight board is important. I think we need to diversify our police force. I think using the Boston Public School graduation requirement is an important piece to doing that. But I also want to say, you know, when I talk to a lot of folks in areas where crime occurs, they're nervous. They're afraid what might happen to their child when they leave their house and they interact with the
Thank you,
police.
Alex. Thanks a lot. Carla, we're switching now to environment and transportation. And the first question goes to you. Running for at-large, you've had a chance now to travel across the city. What has this shown you about the transportation deficiencies of Boston, and how would you work to fix them?
Well, so I live on the corner of Morton and Harvard. And so I'm in my neighborhood. It's so obvious that, you know, we have short MBTA, we're getting the short buses of MBTA, and there is a lack of buses that do frequent our neighborhoods. And you know, there's children waiting at the bus stop for hours and adults waiting for hours just to get to work. And so, you know, I've worked with Rep. Russell Holmes and my neighborhood association to make sure that we can have buses frequent our neighborhoods more frequently, because in the middle of winter, we're standing out there and buses are driving by us full and no one can get on. And so when I'm in other areas, I can see that there are, you know, buses coming every 15 minutes, you know, where in my neighborhood, it may come a lot less frequently. And so I think we need to make sure that we are investing more in public transportation, bike pathways and walking pathways, because I could just walk to Forest Hills if I have the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Bridget, what's your response to that question?
Transportation system, Boston prides itself on having the first in the nation, but it's almost as if it hasn't been updated since.
Bridget,
I mean, even 20 years ago, when I was taking the train
Bridget.
to high school.
Hey, Bridget, can you hear me? We are having.
I can hear you.
We can't hear you that clearly. Hold on, and let's come back to you. Okay?
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Go ahead.
I can type it in. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you clearly. Yes. Go ahead, please. Bridget, we'll come back to you because there's a little connectivity issue here.
You can hear me? So Boston prides itself on being the first in the nation, but I feel like it hasn't been updated since.
Okay, Bridget, I'm sorry. This is not your fault, but let's come back to you because we're having a lot of trouble. Okay.
So even 20 years ago when I was in high school, North Quincy Adams and
okay. Bridget, we'll come back to you. I apologize for that. Nick, why don't you pick that question up and we'll try to figure out what's going on with Bridget's.
Okay.
Thank you.
Having taken the mass transit most of my life, I would say number one is we need to create equity. When I get on the bus, sometimes over in the Seaport area where I used to work, and then get in a bus in Mattapan, why do the buses drastically different? Why is it that one bus is beaten up and the other one is super nice? I'll let you choose which one you think looks nice. It should not be that way. There should be equity across the board. The other thing is we need to ensure that our bus routes, our buses can come on time, and we need to make sure that there's more of them coming, including with the train. I cannot tell you how many times I personally have stood in the snow on the tracks, and it's over and over again, 5 minutes away, 5 minutes away, an hour goes by, I'm late to work. And that is why I talk to many Bostonians who are deciding to drive into work, because we cannot rely on it wholeheartedly as we should.
Kelly Bates.
What I've learned that I know many of you have learned is public transit is still unaffordable. I actually advocate for the bold idea of having a free public transportation system on our T so that everybody can have access. And also for the commuter rail, which is sky high for our workers trying to get into the city. Let's think about Fairmont and that line and how reduced that fare is. I'd like to see that across the commuter rail system so that people aren't spending $10, $12 per day to try to get into the city and work. And it is definitely inequitable as a system. The fact that there are trains that don't connect to certain neighborhoods and geographies so that it's difficult for us to move across the city and be neighbors and work and see each other, and bus lines that need to be all across the city and running at all hours. We should be a city that has transportation well into the evening and night, especially for our workers.
Thank you, Kelly. Michael.
Thank you, Megan. Our public transportation system does not meet the needs of its people, not enough reliable service and gaps in last mile service. I understand the importance of investments in our city's transit system and have been on the record of supporting improvements to our MBTA transit system, including changing the fare system for commuter rail stations as well as fare-free transit system. And as importantly, I've been a longtime advocate that Boston have a seat on the MBTA Fiscal Management Board. Our contribution as a city is over $86 million, and we don't have a say in where any of those funds go. So the time has come for the city of Boston to have a seat on that board. And we're going to continue, obviously, as a council to advocate for investments in our strategic bike lane network as well as rapid transit. And we'll continue to hopefully urging and consult with developers that are coming in to make sure that they're making transportation upgrades and infrastructure upgrades around their properties.
Alex.
Thank you, Megan. I think I come at this a little bit differently than other folks, not being able to see. I've never driven a car, although many people tell me I probably would drive better than many Boston drivers. But I think, there's a few things that the city can do and play a strategic role. I think the adoption of more dedicated bus lanes in our city would be a great step in the right direction. And I think starting the process with where we lay those out in an equitable way, connecting farther out neighborhoods, whether that be Hyde Park or Alston or what have you. We've seen here in Roslindale on the way down to Jamaica Plain, dedicated bus lanes have shortened trips. They've made buses more desirable. This would require, federal stimulus or state funding, maybe using some of the money from President Biden to electrify our commuter rail lines so that places like the Fairmont line and the new trains going in and out of Alston can come every 10 or 15 minutes. And then we need to expand dedicated bike lanes. I think 6 miles went up last year. I'd love to see us doing 5 miles a year until we get to being a leader on that in our country.
I'll just read what Bridget said because we had trouble hearing her. She said Boston prides itself on having the first transportation system in the nation, but it's in major need for an update. The station will flood with minor rainfall. It's completely unreliable. The gentrification in my own town has made a high demand for more bus lines, and hundreds of people are still waiting in lines every morning. Let's move on now to some lightning round questions based on those 2 questions we had just now.
You
Megan,
forgot
you missed
Ritzy. You forgot
Megan, you
Ritzy.
keep forgetting me.
Lucy, why am I doing that? I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I'll try to make my answer memorable. I'll try to make like you won't forget me.
I am so sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
It's especially because I love this question. So running for city councilor at large, it's important that I show up in all 23 neighborhoods. I get around by bike, by MBTA, and by car. And so you see a lot of the stuck traffic patterns. You see a lot of the buses and cars, competing over space because we don't have dedicated bus lanes. So we definitely need that. Think about how much time you would save if when you're running for the bus and you get on the bus, you're not also juggling around for your Charlie card or figuring out how you have to pay for your fare. If we had a free tea and if we're working towards that. We do have an infusion of money from the federal government, money from the state government that we can make that a reality. And yes, Boston does need a site on the T oversight board. So we need dedicated bus lanes, we need more bike lanes to make commuters like me who are multimodal be able to get around the city in a way that is environmentally friendly and addressing the climate justice issue of our time.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, those lightning round questions, and I won't forget anybody this time.
Promise?
I promise. Question, do you support closing the police department's gang database? Yes or no, Kelly Bates?
Yes, I do.
Michael Flaherty?
No, Megan.
Alex?
Yes.
Ruthie?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Bridget? Bridget? Okay.
No.
Okay, great. Nick?
Yes.
Next question, lightning round, yes or no? Yes or no? Currently, residential parking is free. Should Boston residents pay an annual fee for residential parking? Michael Flaherty, yes or no?
No, Megan.
Alex?
No.
Ruthie?
Depends.
No. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Should residents have to pay a fee for parking?
Yeah, should residents pay an annual fee for residential parking?
Really depends, but I'll say no.
Thank you. Carla?
No.
Bridget? Bridget?
No.
No, that's a no. Nick?
No.
Kelly?
No.
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 Okay, got it.
No.
Okay, thank you. We are moving on. I think we have time. John, how are we doing on time? Do we have time for one more question?
You can ask one more since we started a few late. You can go. You can take a few more minutes with one more question.
Okay. This one is on economic development. We'll start with you, Nick. Only 2% of contractors are business companies that have contracts with the city are businesses owned by people of color and white women. What would be your plan to increase that percentage?
Thank you for that. I would work directly with Sun and his office to really look at and hold accountable those licensures as they come through. We need to make sure that people have access. We need to make sure that people know when the deadlines are. I think you're hearing a reoccurring theme here. People need to be in the know of when things need to be in deadlines, and we need to create more support systems to ensure that people have all the tools that they need to successfully apply and receive funds. But we also, as counselors, need to ensure that, and that may require an audit, to ensure that practices are being used that will make sure that there is diversity is prioritized. Because as of right now, it is not. And we need to make sure that we can hold people accountable for their decisions when it comes to making this a fair city for all businesses.
Thank you. Kelly Bates.
I've been both a woman and minority-owned business, and I've run one before. It is so difficult. First of all, sometimes you can't compete for the large contracts. So why don't we think about ways that large contractors could subcontract to more women and Black and brown businesses? I think that's some way that we could go. Also to work across all the departments to help them understand and learn and have access to the range of businesses owned by Black business owners, women business owners, and others, people with disabilities who normally don't have access to our contracts. Help them know who they are and hold them accountable to thinking about ways they can achieve better targets than what we have. It is really abysmal, and we should do a lot better in the city, and I believe we can.
Thank you, Kelly. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Megan. Ways to increase diversity in contracts. We should work with our state legislature to reform Chapter 30B to allow for more detailed procurement capacity and policies that will allow us to ensure that WMBEs are properly equipped to bid, and whether that's for the whole bid or to break down the bid. I also want to reference the Massport model that I've worked closely with. I've had a front row seat and have participated along with folks over at Massport, and a lot of that property is happening in the developments on the South Boston waterfront. providing real opportunity for minority vendors and contractors. So that's it for me. 30B and the Massport model that we should continue to replicate across our city.
Alex?
Yeah, so, it's an important question, and, the city should be investing in all of its people and across all backgrounds. So no doubt about it. And, I think that these contracts tend to fall into largely three buckets: construction, goods, and services. And I think we need an individual approach for each of them. For construction, I think we should be working with groups like Building Pathways that diversify construction, talking with folks like Bridget here, who's been a leader on that, around goods and services. I think we can work with BECMA. We can work with some of the local minority and women-owned businesses. I think Nick brought up a good point about auditing frequently. And, to Kelly's point, people with disabilities, in America today, 8 out of 10 people with disabilities are out of work. It's the largest group demographic minority in America, and also the least employed. So would love to be a champion to ensure people with disabilities have a fighting chance to win city contracts as well.
Ruthie?
That 2% number of businesses is really an embarrassing statistic for the city, especially when you compare it to other cities in the federal government that are doing a lot better. There's no reason why we can't be doing better. There are great nonprofits, some that have been mentioned, that are doing the work to really show us what we need to do. These large contracts that really need to be tranched so that broken down into smaller contracts to make them more accessible for smaller businesses, which also happen to be Black and Latinx owned and women owned, right? So you break down the contracts, you make them more accessible. And that's one path. The other path is a model for the seaport and the supplier diversity that was required in the subcontracting process. And yet another example is providing technical assistance to our businesses. I'm a lawyer, I have my own law firm, and sometimes reading some of the language for these requests for proposals to do business with the city, it is like another language. So how do we expect some of our business owners who may not have a great, technical education to understand the contracting process? So let's meet them where they are in the neighborhoods and help them with the RFP process so they can be successful.
Thank you. Carla?
First, I want to say that BECMA has done a wonderful job exposing a lot of the inequities for Black businesses and for women-owned businesses. I think we should start by unbundling our current contracts and audit them and reassess them for the years for 2022. Also, increasing the budget to support these businesses as well, and mentoring people and showing them how to start a business and what is required for these businesses. The other thing is, I have a nonprofit myself with the Cape Verdean Social Workers Association, which I still haven't done the 501(c)(3) yet because these things are extremely expensive, and they're upwards of $2,500 or more for people to pay for to get the correct documentations that they need to qualify for some of these contracts. And those are things that we need to make sure that we're doing. We need to make sure that we're preparing people and so that they qualify, and also unbundling those contracts so that people have an opportunity. I know the timer wasn't on when I started, so I don't want to cheat and take over more time.
And Bridget?
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
It's saying I'm unstable. All right, good, because I just typed out a big thing. Anyway, I think the inequity in the trades alone, I mean, like you said, Building Pathways is a great program that introduces minorities and women to the trades. There's a huge inequity. We had a goal of 20% by 2020. That obviously didn't help. It didn't happen. We're still at a little over 2% of females in construction right now on jobs. But I think through recruitment, through vocational schools, more vocational Boston public schools, being introduced to young females as well as men would help the inequalities. And I think we need some kind of incentive for small businesses. I mean, you save all your money your whole life to open up your dream business, and the astronomical rents in Boston.
Thanks, Bridget. If Jonathan will allow us, we'll squeeze in one more round of lightning round questions. And then to close out this session, and you guys were phenomenal. Thank you all. The question is currently residential, we asked that question, okay? The question is, although Massachusetts voted to legalize recreational marijuana 5 years ago, the rollout has been very slow. Do you support removing the Zoning Board of Appeal from the process of approving new cannabis businesses in the city? Carla, yes or no?
I think I have to do a little bit more research on that.
Is that a no?
I think I need to look into it a little bit more.
Nick, no answer from Carla. Nick, what's your answer? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, I gotta side with Carl. That's a little loaded, but I would say I would say no. I wouldn't do away with it.
No, okay. Bridget, yes or no?
No.
Kelly, yes or no?
Not at this time.
No. Michael Flaherty.
Yes, I was one of the lead sponsors.
Okay. Alex, yes or no?
I'll say not at this time.
No. Rutzi, yes or no? Rutzi, you're on mute.
Yes, for removing them. Yes, from the process.
Okay. Thank you all for your thoughts and insight on your views of the job and what it takes to be a counselor, and for being here tonight and dealing with some of our technical challenges. But I thought all of you were awesome, and thank you all for being here today. I'll turn it over now to Jonathan.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, it's actually me this
Yeah,
time.
it's going to be Sharon for the
Sharon.
quick interlude. But thank you to everyone.
Sorry,
Thank you,
just give us
Sharon.
a second.
Bye-bye,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks everyone for joining us and just removing our
Sharon.
previous slate of candidates, and really appreciate everyone being here tonight. I'm Sharon. I'm the chair of the Ward 5 Democrats. Tonight, to make sure the conversation was productive, we've broken out our candidates into two different groups. We just heard from group number 1, and we're about to hear from group number 2. Really grateful to group number 1 for joining us. And feel free to stay and hear the other group of candidates if you'd like to. As Jonathan Cohn said, the chair of Ward 4, we are frequent collaborators on forums that provide opportunities to talk about the most pressing issues facing our city, state, and nation. We help our neighbors stay informed, and we also consider endorsements in local and statewide elections. As he mentioned, Ward 4 spans the neighborhoods of the South End, Back Bay, and Fenway, and Ward 5 spans the neighborhoods of Back Bay, Bay Village, Beacon Hill, and Fenway, and a little in Bay Village. Jonathan and I will be sharing in the chat how to stay involved with our committees, and we hope that you can attend a meeting sometime soon. Our meetings are regularly on the third Tuesday of every month. Ward 5 is at 7 p.m. and Ward 4 is at 6:30 p.m. And so we hope you can join us. Megan, I'll let you take it away with our new slate of candidates.
Hello. Excuse me. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the second part of our discussion with the candidates running for City Councilor at Large. This is a new group of 7. There are 17 running, I believe, and only 4 will advance. I'm sorry, only 8 will advance to the final on November 2nd.
Sorry to interrupt,
Are they all
Megan.
here?
If you are in the second group, please put yourself on video. I can't spotlight you without you being on video. Thank
Yes.
you.
Just give me the green light, Karen, when they're
Okay, we're getting going. We're adding everyone.
okay. I'll just give that a little bit of time. I see one person.
It looks like so far we're missing Erin Murphy. If
Her
someone sees
campaign
her,
emailed to say that she has an event that started late and might not be there. From the sound of that email at 7:03, I'd say don't wait.
okay, perfect. I think we're ready to get going.
And John Spillane is not here?
Oh, he's here.
Okay, I don't see him.
He's spotlighted.
Okay, everyone, welcome. This is group 2. We just had a very great discussion with group 1, and we want to welcome the other sort of candidates running for City Councilor at Large. They are Saeed Abdikarim from the South End, James Coleman from Rosendale, Domingos De Rosa from Hyde Park, David Halbert of Dorchester, Julia Mejia from Dorchester, who's a current councilor at large. We just heard that Erin Murphy might not make it today, and John Spillane is here as well. Welcome everyone to our discussion. As I said before, I'd like to just spend a little bit just going over the rules. I'll ask you a question and then you will each have 60 seconds to respond. There is a timer in one of the Zoom panels and you'll hear a signal at the 10-second mark. You will be muted if you go past the 60 seconds. So let's start. Welcome everybody. I'll start with the question I asked the first group to begin. Why are you running for City Councilor at Large, and why do you think you should be elected? Saeed Abdikarim, would you start with that question, please?
Thank you very much for having me tonight. It's an honor and privilege to be here as part of this forum to meet the neglected needs of Bostonians and to bridge the disparity is why I'm running. We have a huge skills, pay, and wealth disparity in the city of Boston. My lived experience is a testament what this great city can do for people if they are equipped with the right skills to thrive. I was resettled in Boston 27 years ago as a refugee. I was given access to education, introduced to tech at an early age. I quickly worked so hard to learn the English language so I can sell newspapers to support my family. I had access to housing, books, etc. People need opportunities, especially STEM and vocational skills. I think I should get the honor and privilege to serve you next City Council at Large member because I bring the vital skills that Bostonians need for a higher pay. Thank you very much.
Next person to answer that question, James Reggie Coleman.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you to Ward 4 and 5 for putting this forum together. I was born in the beautiful island of Haiti, and I came to Boston 25 years ago in search of better opportunities for my family. When I came here, I found a community of immigrants where everyone was striving for the same thing. I am running for this position because I've had the privilege of meeting people from all walks of life. When I met those immigrants, they only had one issue. The main issue about the opportunities they were looking for was language barrier. So overnight, I became the de facto interpreter for them. Fast forward to today, I've worked for 4 mayors in 2 different municipalities. I was Mayor Walsh's liaison to the council. Needless to say, I can hit the ground running on day one. I'm running for this position because I strongly believe that a better Boston is possible for all of us. However, we need to elect leaders that strongly believe that systemic inequities can be addressed when we all come together as one. Thank you.
Thank you. Domingos?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. This is a great opportunity to get to know some of my members who I don't know. I see a lot of familiar faces tonight. I'm running for office my 3rd time. I began this journey in 2017 as a concerned citizen and resident of Boston. I spent 23 years as a city employee in the BCYF, training folks in the aquatics field, from swimming lessons to first aid and CPR and lifeguard training. Over the years, I've seen the disparities between one community versus the other. Taking the opportunity in 2017 and then in 2019 and today, these same issues still exist. A lot of these concerns continue to grow like wildfires across Boston. These issues that we talk about are not new. The individuals who are looking to sit and discuss these conversations might be. But for me, I've been here, I've been doing the work, and I'm just asking for your opportunity in September for your vote.
Thank you. David Halbert.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Ward 4 and Ward 5 for hosting this. The reason that I'm running for a seat on the Boston City Council is because Boston's an incredible city full of opportunities, but we know that those opportunities aren't shared equally by everyone. As a Black man living in this city, I understand what it is when you feel your government looks around you, looks past you, looks through you, and sometimes looks at you with suspicion. But as somebody who's had a career of over 15 years in public service, including serving on the City Council, I know what we can do when we have government that really brings everyone together and values and uplifts representation. We can put our values into action as policies that affirm that housing should be a human right, that there should be educational equity and economic justice throughout our city, that we can meet the challenges of climate change and so many others that I'm sure we're going to talk about this evening. That's what I want to bring to the City Council, that ability to hit the ground running and understand that we can balance out the big ideas of those transformative things that are happening with those small things, making sure your trash gets picked up, your potholes get filled, and your lights stay on. As a resident, as a Boston Public Schools parent, and most importantly, as somebody who believes in the city, that's why I think I should have this job, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on September 14th.
Thank you so much. Councilor Mejia, why are you seeking to be reelected?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here with you. I'm seeking re-election because there's still a lot of unfinished business to do. We won by the grace of one vote. And since being in office, we focused our energy in making sure that those who have been left out of every single conversation not only have a seat at the table, but that we are dictating what is on that menu. And as a first time, as a single mom, a Latina, an Afro-Latina at that, we believe that this moment in times require not just people who are doing the work and living the realities, but that we have someone in office that's going to hold city government accountable, including myself in that process. So considering the work that we've done under COVID, we believe that now is the time to take the work to another level. And when elected, we're going to ensure that not only do we continue to hold ourselves accountable, but that we change the way we do business in city government, which is what I think these times require.
Thank you so much, John.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Spillane. I'm running for Boston City Council at Large. Thank you to Ward 4 and 5 and Megan for hosting us tonight. I'm a lifelong Bostonian who wants to make sure everyone in our city has the opportunity and support to succeed. You know, I've worked for the city of Boston for the past 5 years on some of the most pressing issues facing the city. I spent 3.5 years at the Department of Neighborhood Development working on the rehabilitation, financing, and development of over 1,000 units of affordable housing throughout the various neighborhoods. For the last 1.5 years, I worked for City Councilor Kenzie Bach on things such as connecting seniors with food access during the height of COVID, residents facing eviction with rental assistance, and small businesses, connecting them with city resources. You know, and the real reason I'm running for Boston City Council is it's been a lifelong dream of mine. My mother actually ran for Boston City Council in 1993. And, you know, really raised me in a way to really appreciate giving back to the community. And I want to keep doing that. So thank you so much.
Okay. The next couple of questions just are getting to know you questions. They don't require a minute answer, but let's start. Finish this sentence. James Coleman. The best thing about Boston is, fill in that spot, and the worst thing about Boston is?
Best thing about Boston is that we are a majority minority city where 28% of the population was born somewhere else, the diversity that it offers.
And the worst thing is?
The worst thing is the systemic inequity that exists right now that we need to fix, I will fix as a city councilor at large.
Domingos, the best thing about Boston is, and the worst thing is?
The people. The people of Boston is what makes Boston such a great city. I'm going to echo what Reggie said, is the inequities that exist within our own government and within our own city. The opportunities for Black and Browns are not equal across the board here in Boston. But the people, we're the reason why this city is great.
David.
Yeah, the best thing about Boston is our children. It's the future and the promise that they provide us, children like my own daughters. And the worst thing about Boston, aside from the traffic at times, is once again, those systemic inequalities that exist throughout the city and have their roots in history and often our inability to address them and be honest about them.
Julia.
Yes. Whew, having grown up here in the city of Boston, I would have to say the best thing is our potential to be a leader in race dialogues and conversation. And the worst thing about Boston is our inability to lean into those conversations and to be uncomfortable about the deep systemic racial inequities that continue to persist here day in and day out.
John.
I'd have to say the resiliency. Some people call it stubbornness, but I think the city of Boston really showed, following the Boston Marathon bombing, how tough we are. We're stubborn, we don't give up, we push forward. And I think that's something that, we really have a national reputation for. And I think it's something to be admired. Inequity, echoing everyone else, we're becoming a city of have and have nots. And it's something that we have to intentionally focus on to close the gap.
Saeed. You're muted.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I would agree with the best thing about Boston with Mr. Dominguez and say the people. Going to elementary school in Mission Hill, middle school in West Roxbury, living in Rosendale, living in Old Colony in South Boston, going to Charleston High School and living in Charlestown. I say the best thing about Boston is its people. They're very caring people. They're very kind people. Definitely, it's the people. The worst thing about Boston, I would say, the disparity in the pay, skills, and the wealth gap. Bostonians, need the right skills. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. Skills in STEM and vocational education to thrive and compete.
Next question, easygoing question. What would be the first place you would take a friend visiting Boston for the first time? Dominguez.
My mother's house. Give them some good cooking, some loving food.
That's good. What's her specialty?
Cachupa.
Okay, all right.
It's a Cabo Verde dish, and it takes a special gift to make. It takes countless hours. It's like cooking Thanksgiving dinner for one dish.
David.
It would probably be Pierce Park in East Boston. There's no place where you can get a better view of the city. It's fantastic. And while you're on your way there, you can get some incredible food, whether you're talking about Italian food at Reno's or my favorite burrito in town at Cactus Grill in Maverick Square, whatever it is, it's a great place to spend a day.
Julia.
Yes, I would take them to Jamaica Plain Heights Square, which is the landing spot for so many Dominicans who first come to this country. It's a near and dear space in my heart. And so I would walk them down memory lane. And I love the rich and how diverse Jamaica Plain is still.
John.
The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I think it's a hidden gem of the city. If anyone hasn't been there, you should go check it out. The foray there is incredible. So it's more than a Netflix show.
Saeed.
The place I would take them to, it doesn't exist anymore. It's Friendly's in West Roxbury, because that's the first place I used to eat a lot of ice cream when I was going to middle school in Westie. But I would say the Arnold Arboretum, because I spent a lot of time there as a kid. It's very beautiful. And I just love parks and playgrounds.
Reggie. You're muted.
The Arboretum, it's free. Bring a blanket, some food, and you have a wonderful time.
A lot of good answers there. Reggie, I want you to start the conversation we're going to have next about housing. How would you expand affordable housing in Boston and ensure development without displacement?
Well, the housing issue is not the first time we're facing the housing shortage right now in Boston. Secretary Walsh, then Mayor Walsh, before he came to office, said we needed at least 52,000. Soon after, he said, no, we don't need more than that. So right now, what we need to do an inventory of what we have on city owned land to see how we can build throughout the city, not only low-income neighborhoods, which further segregation if we do that, to make sure that we build 3 to 4 bedrooms as opposed to the 1 bedroom that currently exists, to make sure that we keep families in the city. so that we can have the diversity that we need and the riches that we need to have, and make sure that we increase IDP also.
Domingos.
You're muted, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. But first and foremost, for folks that don't know, Bromley Heath Housing Development is actually on that chopping block. Folks who live there are going to be displaced, just like they did in Orchard Gardens and Mission, Maine. We have to stop selling off city-owned property. We can't continue to give off our housing developments to property management companies because we fail to upkeep the establishments. A lot of our public housings are in very bad shape, and we need to be able to bring them back to today's standards. And we also need to use whatever parcels we still continue to have to build low-income housing for families that earn under $40,000 a year. There's a lot of individuals who are facing this displacement because the median income here in Roxbury is $33,000, and we also have to increase the IDP to reflect Boston's needs.
Thank you. David.
Yes, when we're talking about the housing crisis that we're facing, we have to address it by making more housing. That's why I'm a proponent of what I call smart density. It's not just throwing buildings anywhere in the city, it's making sure that we're siting them next to mass transit hubs, next to major transit thoroughfares. So while we're increasing the amount of housing that people have access to, we're also hopefully decreasing or minimizing the impact on our climate and our environmental situation here in the city. But it's also making sure that as we're building these new buildings and housing, that we're connecting them with good, high-paying jobs, and increasing the proponents of the Boston Resident Jobs Policy program, making sure that we're providing with opportunities for women, for minorities to be involved in the building trades in a robust way and have careers. And it's also making sure that we're standing up for those individuals who are currently in housing. That's why I was proud to stand with so many others in the community in Jamaica Plain with the Forbes building and in Hyde Park, at Georgetown Homes, and lending my voice as I would do as a member of the City Council to making sure that we're preserving housing for everyone who needs it in the city.
Thank you, David. Julia. Counselor.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to mute. Let's look at that. Start all over because someone walked in and I had to let them know. Clock. Please. Are we going to reset the clock?
Okay.
Just keep going and we'll let you go,
Okay.
go to the appropriate time pass.
Thank you, because I'm on a Zoom, sorry. All right, so what I would do is, what I've been fighting for is to increase the IDP to 50%. We need to build with what is needed here in the city of Boston. The other piece of it is that we need to have a regional metrics for how we just determine the area median income. Right now, it's based on across Boston and other towns, and so we need to make it hyper local. And the other piece of it is that we are planning in development with developers in mind. We need to have a community centered and a people policy led way of how we plan, because that is how we keep our people here. And that is what we have done in our office. We've created a citywide steering committee to ensure that those who are most impacted are now sitting at the table and designing, planning policies to inform the BPDA on how we're going to do business here in the city.
All right, thank you, Julia. John.
Okay, so we need to let everybody know that they can come through.
John.
Hi, thank you. I mean, housing is one of the top issues facing the city. I think we need to be, inventive with new approaches to solve this problem. Obviously we need to focus on transit-oriented density, but additionally, I think we need to start looking at giving permanent priority to developers that have a higher number of affordable units. That's an incentive that I think they would be interested in. It would minimize their risk window for the cost of raw materials increasing. I also want to highlight something Domingos brought up, is the fact that we have a lot of units that are currently on rental restrictions that are set to sunset in the next couple decades. It's a huge issue. We need to be aggressive. We need to build more affordable units. Also, I think we need to expand our ZBA board. Right now we have a process where people go into a ZBA meeting and it feels rushed. If we expand our ZBA board, we can have more meetings, have a better community process. People will feel more heard and will make up that extra cost in permitting fees.
Thank you, John. Saeed.
Thank you. Housing is a vital life resource. It makes our city very vibrant and competitive. Living in Boston public housing, when I was growing up throughout the city, I know what suitable housing can do for people, because in Africa, we lived in a shack made of tree branches and pieces of cloth. We need to increase the IDP. And coming from a numbers background, I would like to, look at the, AMI and see how that is figured. And I think I'm the only, or maybe the earliest candidate that proposed a community elected board as part of PPDA to be at the table. When any developments are going up in the city of Boston, to advocate for the number of, affordable housing units. And lastly, we need to equip people with the right skills for high paying jobs. Thank you.
Okay, we're switching now to education. Domingos, I'd like you to start with this question. Boston is set to receive considerable funding from the federal government as part of the American Rescue Plan. What would be your top priorities for allocating this money?
Oh, my first top priority, would be to build new facilities, first and foremost. As you know,
I'll go into the other room. I'm done with the painting for now. Sorry about the
with
noise.
the COVID-19 pandemic, we've learned so much about our buildings. And before then, as a BPS student, graduating from Madison Park in '96, a lot of our buildings were already decrepit. Some of that funding needs to go into, a school like Madison to make sure that we continue to expand the VOTech education here in Boston, build a second VOTech school so we can have one in another part of the city so students can have access to that. We also need to make sure that we meet the Boston job residency policy with the 51% Bostonians. We need more teachers who look like me, who sound like me, and who are from Boston. Make sure our students receive the adequate education that we all deserve here in Boston.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, when we're talking about this money, we have to remember there's two pots, right? There's the general pot that's going to be coming to the city for a number of different ideas that we can put that towards, and then the separate amount of funding that's going to be coming towards education in particular. I think we do need to reinvest in our physical infrastructure, and we need to leverage those dollars most effectively by also partnering with the state and the school building authority and seeing where we can amplify those dollars and the amount that we have, and we can invest in all the infrastructure in our schools. But we also have to be more bold and visionary, thinking about investing in true comprehensive wraparound services for our students, making sure that we have universal K0 and K1 access for every family in the city of Boston. That doesn't just transform from an educational standpoint, that also does from an economic standpoint because of the flexibility and the ability it gives people to work in new ways, and making sure that we're investing in innovative ideas like Madison Park, which I've championed for a long time, is putting it and orienting it to be the #1 green vocational high school in the entire country. We have the funding, we have the opportunity, we have this moment, and we have to take advantage of it if we're going to be as bold as we want to be and build the kind of city and education system we need to have.
Thank you. Julia.
Okay, so some of the things that we've been advocating for on the council is really looking at trauma-informed practices. We have been led to believe that we're just going to continue to do business as usual post-COVID. And I think what we really need to do is pour dollars and resources to both ensure not only our families, but also our educators are being well prepared to enter back into the space. I also know that another issue that we've been fighting for is HVAC systems and really making sure that schools and the air quality across all Boston public schools are up to par. And then the other piece of the work is really family engagement. What we've heard in every space that we've been in is that families and educators do not feel heard. And what we need to do is build in the infrastructure to ensure that not only are we listening to the people, but we're developing their skills. So I pour money into that space. And then the last piece is Madison Park. Madison Park, it's treated like the stepchild, and I would pour in resources to make sure that they are the #1.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks so much. So kind of echoing a couple of the ideas that we heard previously, I think the 3 top priorities we should have is, 1, we need to dramatically expand our universal pre-K program. This is something we've been talking about since the 2013 mayoral race. We not only universal pre-K, but pre-K with early childhood care. Also, we really should leverage those fundings into capital improvements for the city of Boston public schools. A majority of them were built, I believe, pre-World War I, making sure that kids can stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And then lastly, vocational. We should really make Madison Park the jewel of the United States and be forward-looking, looking at solar and wind turbines, making sure that we're creating vocational jobs for the future, not just for the now. Oh, and then I got 14 seconds. Yeah, so I think we should really, we can really leverage those fundings using them as leverage for greater investment for our local economy. So.
Thank you, John. Saeed.
Thank you. Just to echo what some of my friends said, we need to invest in universal pre-K. As an ESL learner, I struggled mightily in elementary school because I didn't have the pre-K education. And Boston has one of the most, diverse school districts in the country. And once you have a diverse school district, you have competing factors. You have, students with disabilities. You have the ESL learners. You have students that come from underserved communities. So definitely, I would say universal pre-K. Invest in STEM and vocational education, healthy food access, better pay for teachers, and arts, because some students, arts is a universal language. Some students that can't speak English, or some students that have disabilities, they can communicate through art. Thank you.
Reggie.
Thank you, Megan. It has to start from the bottom up, universal pre-K. But while we are at it, we have to make sure that we have childcare for parents. Because I know many parents that are struggling because they do not have childcare for their kids. Furthermore, we are a city of first. Yet, when it comes to vocational training, when I look at the best 25 schools in the nation, none of them are in Boston. That is a disgrace. We need to make sure that we re-energize the vocational training program we have at Madison Park, and also perhaps include vocational training in other schools like the two community colleges we have, Bunker Hill and Roxbury. We have to make sure that we prepare those kids for vocational training from early on, from the 7th grade to when they get to high school, they know, like they are in Germany, they know what kind of trade they want to go into. I want to make sure that we follow models of other countries, such as Germany, to see how they're doing so we can do it better than them. We are a city of first, we can do this, we can have a better Boston for all of us.
Thank you very much.
Education.
It's time now for our first lightning round set of questions. These just require a yes or no response. And I'll start by asking the question. And David, you go first. If Massachusetts lifted the ban on rent control ordinances, would you seek to pass one? Yes or no?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Saeed?
Yes.
Reggie?
Yes.
Domingos?
Yes.
That was very easy. Second question. Should the school committee be appointed, elected, or hybrid? And if hybrid, okay, that's not a yes or no question. Let's pick another one. Let's pick another question.
I love that question, though.
Do you support removing police from the Boston public schools? Julia, yes or no?
Yes.
John?
No.
Saeed?
Yes.
Reggie?
Yes.
Domingos?
Yes, yes, yes.
Let's squeeze in one more. Should the city...
Megan, I didn't get a chance to answer that.
David?
Yes.
I have a habit of doing that. There's so many of you, it's hard to keep track. Should the city eliminate the Boston Planning and Development Agency and create a new independent planning office? David, go first. Yes or no?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
John?
No.
Saeed?
No.
Reggie?
No.
Domingos?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on now to police reform. And David, you will start with the first question. What can the council do to increase accountability in general with the Boston Police Department?
Yeah, it's a critical question. The answer to every public safety issue isn't an officer with a gun. So what we can do is put our money behind our values. Where you spend your money shows what you value. And that means funding more additional supports for mental health clinicians, for social workers, for substance use disorder counselors. But it also means making sure that the apparatus that we set up, like the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency, isn't just a paper tiger. Making sure that it has the funding and the resources that it needs to conduct its work in a way that is transparent, that is robust, trust and that folks can feel confident in. Look, the simple fact of the matter is different communities have different relationships with public safety in this city. We have to be honest about that because the most fundamental element of public safety isn't a gun, it isn't a badge, and it isn't a cruiser. The most fundamental element of public safety is trust. And trust has been eroded for far too long in far too many communities in this city. And that's why we have to make sure that we're putting those kind of resources, that we're holding folks to account, and that we're asking the most appropriate questions that we can to get the public safety we deserve.
Thank you, David. Julia.
Yes. So I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is that our office has been one of the loudest voices when it comes to all things with police reform, in addition to advocating to eliminate the gang database as well as BRIC. We have held several public hearings specifically around restorative justice and creating opportunities for young people to really lead those conversations. We also filed and passed the Civilian Review Board alongside Councilor Arroyo and Andrea Campbell, and we fought to have a young person in that space. And we believe that those who are living the realities need to be at front and center, informing the work. And so that is part of the process. And in terms of reimagining public safety in our schools, what we need to do is stop criminalizing students. And I think that begins and ends with removing police officers, not only from our schools, but from any space that will create the hostility that we see in the city of Boston. And we need
John. Thank you, Julia. John.
Thank you. You know, I think we really need to make sure that the OPAD office that was set up is put in a place to succeed. I think Stephanie Everett was a wonderful choice to lead that department. I think she'll do a wonderful job if we're providing her with the resources that she needs. I think we need to look at expanding body cameras to include overtime. And additionally, I think we need to look at making greater efforts to try to diversify our police force. Lastly, I think we need to really be more aggressive in our community policing model. You know, I think when Nora Bastian was temporarily being looked at for commissioner, one thing that a lot of people highlighted was her experience in community policing and, you know, really asking those officers that have a good reputation for community policing how to improve that.
Thank you. Saeed.
Thank you. You know, we need to hire police officers that come from the communities they're trying to represent. We need more diversity in our police force. We definitely can't have officers, you know, that live outside of the city coming into Boston and working in our city. We need to have, you know, accountability, transparency, more body cams. We need to have, you know, less police calls for, you know, non-violent events. And also we need to give people that have been in the criminal justice system a second chance because this country is all about second chances. And, you know, we need to give them the opportunity to, you know, thrive and become a productive citizen of society. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. Reggie.
The timing of the Office of Accountability and Transparency couldn't be any better. What's happening is the fact that we have a police department that is not what it can be. I want to make sure that our police mirrors the community serving. So we need to hire more people. More police officers are leaving. I think about 400 are leaving right now. But then again, there's an incoming class of 100 only. So needless to say, we need police officers. I know that I get some backlash when I say that. We need to make sure that we feel safe wherever we call home in Boston. We need to make sure that community policing is front and center of what we're doing because it works and it shows that it works. And I believe that once the trust is established between the people and the police department, there'll be less crime, and eventually we'll have a better Boston for all of us.
Thank you. You will notice that the timer is not working, so I'm keeping track on my phone on your time, and you guys are doing excellent. Everybody's under a minute. And so we'll continue on with Domingos.
Yes, accountability has been a big issue here in Boston with BPD. I like to say, you know, it's a good step forward by having a civilian review board, but we also have to be in connection with the department. There's a lot of things that we can do as a city when we talk about holding the police accountable. First, we need to put a cap on overtime as a city council. We can't continue to allow overtime to be, you know, an issue where there's not a cap. Overtime in Boston for BPD is at $75 million. It's a big chunk of our budget. We also need to make sure that we provide training to the Boston Police Department. I believe right now it's like a 3-month training. We need to provide the same type of training that they do with the military, where they give them about a year of basic training to make sure that individuals receive the adequate training. We also need to make sure that the relationship between the residents and the police department comes off as a mutual agreement. We can't continue to allow.
Thank you so much, Domingos. Okay. All right. The next question goes to the counselor. You've had time now to travel across the city and going into all of the neighborhoods. What have you learned about the transportation deficiencies in Boston, and how would you work to fix them?
Yes. So what we have seen here in all 22 neighborhoods is that I see that there are some, what I call transportation deserts, right? So there are certain neighborhoods that have absolutely no infrastructure for buses or even trains. We have seen that there's some, in West Roxbury in particular, it costs like $12 to $16 just to ride the commuter rail. So I think that there are also some financial hardships for folks who, if they do have access to the commuter rail, it's really expensive. What I would also have seen, and I actually took the bus one night just to see what it was like for late night transportation, and it was very limited. We need more late night transportation, especially for third shift workers and folks who need to get to and from work. So in terms of the work, what I have seen across the city of Boston, no matter where you live, there are concerns around transportation.
Thank you for that. John?
Thanks, Megan. So I don't own a car. So for the entirety of my campaign, I've been using public transit, and I try to take pictures where I can. I think the city of Boston needs a seat on the Financial Management Control Board, which is set to sunset at the end of this month. I actually wrote an article about it in the Dorchester Reporter and passed a petition trying to support our legislators from the city of Boston that have been fighting for that. It's a difficult thing when you miss that train and it's, the next one's not for 20 minutes. So I think the city of Boston should have a seat on the Financial Management Control Board at the state level.
Saeed.
Thank you very much. As someone, who's been riding the T for a very long time, one of the things that I noticed is that, the T is not on time, and, it's very outdated. So recently, not recently, but a little while ago when I saw that the Orange Line had new trains, I was very excited. So one thing I could definitely say is that I'm open to the idea of making transportation free for everyone. Just looking at the numbers right now, I'm currently only open to making it free for low-income communities, people with disabilities, teachers, essential workers, et cetera. Definitely, we can improve the infrastructure of the T. If we can make it energy efficient, that means we can save on overhead costs. And also, if we can create a system that allows us to be on time, that'd be great.
Thank you. James.
I have a teenage daughter that is 15 and a son that is 11. Therefore, I have to have a car. However, when I take public transportation, it's a disgrace for me to see that, again, we're a city of first subway system in the nation. Yet, it's so faulty. We need to stop investing in trains. We need to invest in the infrastructure rather than the trains. If you don't have the infrastructure, trains are not going to be running. Perhaps we should be more innovative to see what others are doing to do it better. And I strongly believe that free city-wide transportation system is doable. And I feel that if we're paying them close to $90 million, we should have a seat and have a say in the finances of the MBTA.
Domingos. You are on mute.
Okay. Yep. Lifelong residents of Boston have been using the T since middle school. This is one of the issues that we face day in, day out as working class citizens. What I would like to see is the Orange Line extended into Reedsville so it can reduce the amount of traffic especially on Hyde Park Ave and Washington Street. Both sides can kind of use those new stations that go all the way into Reeville or even to Dedham. We can stretch it as far as we can using the tracks that are there. I also like to see new lines be added, especially that we have all these new developments across the city. There's a lot of communities that only have one bus line to and from, and we need to be able to add one or two more to make sure that these stops folks can reach. We also can make the T system free by adding tolls in our entry points within the state of Massachusetts. It's not fair that individuals who live in Massachusetts pay a toll to use Mass Pike, but folks who come from New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island can travel to and from work without having to pay a toll. We also
thank you, Demetrius. 1 minute, David. You're next.
Absolutely. We travel all across the city and you can see that there are discrepancies, massive discrepancies in what our transportation infrastructure looks like. We do need to invest and make sure that we're making space for real bus rapid transit. We need to have a holistic view of what transportation is. Yes, investing in our mass transit system, but also making sure that we're investing in protected bike lanes and connecting them through all neighborhoods, making sure that we're taking care of our streetscapes so that they're accessible, whether you have mobility issues or not, making sure that we're thinking about transportation, not just in terms of how we move people, but why people move, and having intentional conversations about planning and siting and clustering goods and services in areas so that people don't have to go and get behind the wheel of a car or even get on a train or a bus in order to go from stop to stop to stop to get the things that they need. If we take this 360-degree view of transportation, we can really affect a real revolution in what urban transportation looks like. And we need to make sure that we're expanding that conversation beyond the borders of Boston and engaging with our partners throughout the 170 other communities with the MBTA service area and the regional transit authorities all across the state so we can build the critical mass necessary to move items on Beacon Hill, which is where this really happens in regards to invest.
Thank you, David. Let's start with John for the next question. How can the city revitalize small businesses after the recession and a crushing pandemic?
Thank you, Megan. You know, that's been an interesting question. When you walk down a lot of the main streets in our business districts and all the different neighborhoods, you see a lot of vacancies. I think we need to explore the potential of putting in a classification system in the commercial appraisal. Right now it's residential or commercial. There's no commercial scale for small businesses versus a business on Newbury Street. I think that's something that we could possibly look to explore. I think we should also potentially look at community grant programs where we're investing in small community businesses to make sure that they're put in a place to succeed, as well as looking at you know, some of the permanent expansions for outdoor use that we saw this past year with deck and patio, and you know, taking back some of our public space and using it in a way that, you know, brings in people to the city in our communities.
Thank you, John. Saeed.
Thank you. You know, small businesses have played a vital role in the city of Boston and throughout the country. We definitely need to, you know, revitalize small businesses by giving them the resources that they need. And the first resource is money. You know, they need to have access to funds, whether it's from the city or from the state. You know, because these businesses are bringing money back to the community. You know, they're supporting our local schools, and also, you know, that's someone's lifeline. So definitely, I will start with, you know, access to funding and make it a lot easier to access these funding. One example I can give you is recently I went to a small mechanic shop here in the city of Boston. I think it was around Center Street, and the owner, he's an immigrant. I think he's from the Dominican Republic. He didn't even know how to access, you know, city funding for a small business.
Thank you so much, Saeed. 1 minute. Reggie, I keep going back, James, Reggie, but I'm going to stick with Reggie.
It's quite all right, Megan. Thank you so much. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. Whenever the economy goes sour, big chains are the first one to leave town. Small businesses, mom and pop businesses are always here with us. We need to support them. We need to work with the legislature to see how we can revise Chapter 30B, the Uniform Procurement Act. We need to see how we can break up those big contracts. I've been hearing that some businesses do not know how to bid for certain projects. They don't have the bonding needed. Well, let's show them how to do it. let's meet them where they are. It is possible for the small business to be the backbone of the economy, just like they should be, as always.
Domingos, you're on mute.
Thank you, guys. As a small business owner, I know the challenges it takes to, one, start the business, two, keep it afloat, and three, to make sure that you have the required documents in place so you can continue to thrive. Here in Boston, the challenges that we face as business owners are endless. With this pandemic, this last year has made it even more difficult for us to be able to obtain information and the services and support we need. That's something that we can change as a city, is to make sure that's access to the information and access to the service. And of course, increasing the funding to make sure folks who want to start a business can start a business within their own community. And also making sure that, you know, we build communication between property owners. So individuals who want to rent or lease out spaces within their community can. And that's something that's very difficult to find the individuals who own these buildings. It's impossible at times to communicate with the folks who do own these businesses or these buildings.
Thank you, Domingos. David.
I've been a proud member of the East Boston Main Streets Board for a number of years. And one of the reasons I stay involved is because small businesses are so critical. Making sure that we're investing in our Main Streets program all across the city, making sure that we use and leverage that as the vital resource that it is for community development, for business development in each of our neighborhoods, but also understanding that all businesses aren't created equal, even our small businesses. And so in certain communities and in certain populations, there are additional challenges that they're facing because people don't come in, they're not bringing the kind of foot traffic that they need, they're not investing in that way. So we need to make sure that businesses, particularly those led by women and people of color, have access to capital. And we're working with our financial institutions to make that happen, that we're spending from a city standpoint, from procurement, and putting those dollars that we have back into our communities and in our small businesses, understanding that the amount of contracting that happened with our small business, particularly Black and brown businesses, is absolutely appalling, and we need to address that. And also making sure that we're being creative about it, leveraging things like our pilot agreements and incentivizing our nonprofit institutions to once again put their dollars back into our community with our small businesses.
Thank you, David. Councilor, please close it out, this question.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just say 4 things that our office has already done. We filed an ordinance to look at commercial vacancies. We see a lot of neighborhoods that have empty lots. So we want to create spaces for small businesses to be able to incubate in those spaces. We also fought and secured over $350,000 to keep outdoor dining permanent post-COVID, because we know that will help support our small businesses. And we also held a public hearing on small businesses across the entire city of Boston, not just regulated to Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, but to make sure that these small businesses are also able to thrive in Faneuil Hall and on Newberry Street. And the last thing I'll say in terms of small businesses is that we filed and passed a new ordinance, residential kitchens, to give people an opportunity to be able to incubate in their homes and sell baked goods and be able to bring in supplemental income, while also I think that's a violence prevention strategy, because if you're a single mom, you're able to take care of your kids while also making a little bit of money.
Thank you so much. Let's get on to our lightning round questions. I'm going to start with you, Saeed. Do you support allowing non-citizens with legal status the right to vote in municipal elections? Yes or no?
No.
Reggie?
Yes.
Domingos?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Councilor?
Yes.
John?
No.
Thank you. Although Massachusetts voted to legalize recreational marijuana 5 years ago, the rollout has been very slow. Do you support removing the Zoning Board of Appeal from the process of approving new cannabis businesses in the city? Yes or no, James?
No.
Domingos?
No.
David?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
John?
No.
Saeed?
No.
Should Newberry Street be pedestrian only year-round? Domingos, yes or no?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Julia?
Yeah, I never thought about it, but
Yes?
I don't know. Yes.
John,
Yes.
Said,
No.
Reggie.
Oh, yes.
Last question. Do you support safe consumption sites? David,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
John.
Yes, if it's on Long Island.
Okay, so that's yes. Said,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Domingos.
Yes.
Okay, do we have time for one more question, John or Sharon?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, you can do one more.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's see. We have one last question here. All of you are planning to spend the next few months working to turn out votes for the upcoming elections. What can the city do to increase civic participation in local elections? Domingos, let's start with you.
First and foremost, we need to add this to the curriculum in BPS so people can be educated on what this process looks like. And also, you know, we're probably one of the only cities that doesn't advertise elections. We also can increase councilors' terms from 2 to 4 and put it on the same cycle as the mayor and the governor's cycle, making sure that, you know, folks come out and vote on these major elections. We can't continue to allow, you know, a lot of the time frames, you know, we're going 2 years, 4 years, and 6 years, and each election changes in the turnouts. And we can mainstream this by putting it all on the same calendar cycle, and that will help keep the numbers where we need them to be. And also engaging folks who are disconnected by showing them that their vote counts. And not only doing that, but bringing in the services like we did for early elections for the presidential election. We can use the same technology to make it easy and accessible for folks. I live on High.
Thank you, Domingos. David.
All right. The city should fight for mail-in voting access for all elections. The city should make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and trying to fight for same-day voter registration and working with our partners on Beacon Hill because we know that's critically important. Early voting should be expanded and have access for every election. We need to make sure that we're having real intentional conversations about re-precincting. You know, there was a story in the Globe just over this weekend about the fact that you have 7,500 or so odd voters in one precinct in the Seaport, you know, even more than that, tens of thousands in Chinatown. It is unfair and it disproportionately impacts communities of color, in particular in low-income communities. And we also need to make sure that we're having real intentional thought about changing some things that we're doing, making sure that we have a real conversation about moving the preliminary. I think it should shift from being 6 weeks before the general, actually towards the end of May or June, to give more time for folks to engage, to learn about candidates, about these critically important conversations, critically important jobs.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yes, so as someone who won by one vote, no one understands how important getting out the vote is than I do, okay? But I think it's beyond just the vote and on election. I think that we need to be intentional. The city needs to do a better job post-election in keeping constituents engaged in all aspects of their lives so that when an election does come up, then people have the desire and the will to want to go out and vote. So I think that there's some stuff that we can do in the most immediate, which is making sure that there's more signage. I know I drive through certain neighborhoods and I don't see election season in certain parts, and I see them in other spaces. So I think that we need to build equity around what that looks like. We need translation and interpretation. That information needs to be going out in multiple languages. And then we also need to also recognize that not everybody knows how to read and write, even in their own native language. So we need to utilize the audio and visuals and other ways to connect and engage voters in this conversation.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. Kind of echoing a couple of my fellow colleagues' thoughts. Domingos hit the nail on the head. We have to change our election cycle to make sure that we're lining up with mayoral and presidential. David hit the nail on the head when we're talking about looking at precincting to make sure that we're minimizing the lines for some of these areas where, you know, there's, you know, you shouldn't wait an hour to vote. And lastly, I think it should be a citywide holiday. You know, democracy is a beautiful thing. I think we should celebrate it. And you know, we could create a fun atmosphere where we have, you know, field days and, you know, local carnivals to kind of celebrate the fact that, you know, we have an election. So
Saeed.
Excellent question. Throughout this process and running for office, I've been very fortunate to be part of different forums and to be with different wards in the city of Boston. I think wards can play a vital role in helping people become more civically engaged. Connecting with people, creating more awareness, especially in communities where they don't trust the political process, or where it might be a language barrier. And also, if we could start on in our education system, have a civically engaged coursework in school, maybe in high school or before that. Definitely, I can see more people being part of the political process. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Let's start with same-day registration. And I'm glad that we live in Boston and we live in the state where you don't have to show an ID. Mail-in voting should be, basic. Move the prelim earlier. So once you pass that stage, you can have more time to meet more voters. Representing definitely has to be part of the conversation. Translation and interpretation, make sure that we don't do it on a reactive basis, but rather on a proactive basis. And lastly, make sure that it is a municipal holiday.
Thank you. And that will have to be our last word for tonight. I want to thank every single one of you for your thoughtful comments on your vision for the City Council and for the city. I'm Meghan Irons, and I want to applaud our audience as well for sticking with us for these 2 hours. I will now turn it over to Sharon, who will close us out.
We're so grateful to everyone for joining us. We've included some details in the chat for how to get involved in our respective ward committees. And we look forward to continuing our conversation with Boston and with all of the at-large candidates that joined us tonight at our meetings. Thank you all for everything, for being here, and thanks for engaging, and thanks for running. We're so proud of this slate of candidates and all that you guys are trying to accomplish in your run. So have a great night.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Good job, Megan.
Thank you, everyone.